So we must do two things, two great things together to encompass that enormous new view that lies before us, but to encompass it within the framework of science, to see it within the whole categorical framework of science, and to see that these two are not separate, but that they are wedded. The bigness of the idea, the newness of the idea, the greatness of it is one with the structure of science, the structure of being itself. When we go to the textbook, we see that Mrs. Eddy, too, gives a sense of Christian Science. But she says, first of all, on page 577, line 28, that the writer's present feeble sense, does this sound feeble to you? The writer's present feeble sense of Christian Science closes, so that this textbook was her present feeble sense of Christian Science. And she says, I'm closing it with St. John's revelation as recorded by the great apostle. For his vision is the acme of this science as the Bible reveals it. And so she leaves that further vision to the ages to come to find it, to ferret it out, to see that there is a still higher vision. And then she says, in the following psalm, one word shows, though faintly, the light which Christian Science throws on the Scriptures by substituting for the corporeal sense, see, substituting for the corporeal sense the incorporeal or spiritual sense of deity. That's really where John has left us in that descent in absolute Christian Science, with that incorporeal sense, isn't it? That there was no temple therein. That the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are the temple thereof. And that this is the incorporeal sense, and that this kingdom of heaven is within you. So this kingdom of heaven is within you, it is within us. And Mrs. Eddy does not finish her textbook, therefore, with the seventh vision as John had it, but with the 23rd Psalm. And so we are on that level of Christian Science with the accent on love. And the epitome there for love is the incorporeal or spiritual sense of deity demonstrates love's perfection in the human experience. And so we are going to see that 23rd Psalm as the fulfilled sense of the descending way. Fulfilled sense with the whole accentuation on love, on the consciousness of the 7,000-year period. As though to say, now, do we see what has been going on all along? Do we see now, as we come into this standpoint of the complete descent now of that consciousness to the point of Christian Science, the point of the human level, the point of our subjective consciousness? do we see what love has been doing all along. How does the seventh standpoint look back and sweep up within itself all of those first 6,000-year periods? And this 23rd Psalm gives us that atmosphere of consciousness. So as mind, you can see that consciousness is no longer objective. It isn't objective. It is subjective. So consciousness says, love is my shepherd. Love has always been the shepherd. Love has always been there, has always been the one that was leading everything along that ascending way. It was love that caused the first light to break. It was love that was the attractor in the Word, that attracted us to that Word, that attracted us to the light. So love is the one that has been leading me. From the first dawning of that light, the first inkling of that light, it was always the light of love. And therefore, there is nothing I can want for in this consciousness. There's nothing left to want for. Love has given me now love's mind, that I can see that everything was love, that I know that everything was love. So I am at the point of love's mind. I have love's mind, and I can't want for anything else. Isn't that true? That to have the mind of love is to have no want. Nothing left to want. No desire is left. So that textbook that begins with desire, the desire of mind, is absolutely fulfilled in love. That, as she says in the Apocalypse, that the spiritual idea will guide all right desires in their passage from sense to soul, up to the glory prepared for them who love God. So I am love's mind. And then the text goes on. We see it's been divine love is my shepherd, I shall not want. As spirit, love maketh me to lie down in green pastures. Love leadeth me beside the still waters. So love has brought me into green pastures. What do we know that means in terms of today? Because these are biblical terms, they are old terms, they are terms that we love, and yet we must see what they imply for today. That love has brought us into the infinite field of spirit, into those green pastures, the infinite field of spirit, into the full consciousness of love's field as the field of spirit. And it's a productive field, a fertile field. That field that we've looked at this week is green, fertile, burgeoning, ever new. It's a field of consciousness. The love has brought us into the full consciousness of love's field, love's transparent field, which is the field of all fields, and led us beside still waters. Here we have the waters again, still waters. Whenever you have still waters, you have that sense of like knowing like, of being face to face, of having that pure reflection, that now we see that everything reflects love. that we are face to face with love. That actually we were always face to face with love, even when it looked like turbulent waters, flood waters, disturbed waters, chaotic waters, that it was always love's still waters. The sense that love is infinite in its transparency and its reflection, and that the whole ascending way and descending way is bringing us to the understanding of that and the demonstration of that understanding. So that I am the likeness of love. I am love's own likeness. I am love's own reflection. It's just one value. You see that really happening in the whole world, that love is raising up that understanding. It may look like the science of chaos or the science of turbulence or a breakthrough in mathematics to see into a higher form of mathematics, a higher kind of equation than has been seen before, or a new kind of physics, or the breakthrough to seeing beyond a particulate form to the form of fields. All these breakthroughs are love. Love's field breaking in on every other field and bringing out just one value, so that now we are at the point of maximum order. We are love's own complex idea. So we come to soul. Love restoreth my soul. Spiritual sense. Love has restored me to what I am. Love restores us to what we are, what we have always been, eternally been. It is really the identity principle at work. Love is the identity principle. Love is bringing out that identity. Because love is soul. And I am soul idea. We are soul idea. I am love's identity. And so now I have no other sense of things, you see, but the spiritual sense. No other sense of what has been going on, but love sense. Do you ever touch that? Do you ever have glimpses of that where you suddenly see your whole life pass before you and you realize it was love? Have you ever had that? Yeah. And when you have that consciousness, you think you will never lose that. You will never lose it. But it turns out to be a glimpse. It's that insight. It's the insight that the kingdom of heaven within us gives us. That incorporeal sense gives us. Principle. Love leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. So where has love been leading us? Into love's paths. That all the paths were paths of love. That all the categories have been love's categories. So that principle is love, isn't it? The principle of being is love. The divine principle is love. The infinite principle expresses itself as love. And so we've been led into the paths of love's science, love's principle. The categories, the system, the reign of love, the reigns of love, of being reigned over by love's reigns, the discipline, all the sense of being strictured by the structure, of being held by the structure, of perhaps at one point feeling held in, of feeling that one didn't know what was coming, didn't know what kind of demonstration this new form of consciousness would bring us, these categories would bring us. And now we see that all those strictures on us were love strictures. And why? Why? Because love did it for its own sake. Love does it for its own sake. Love is its own reason, you see, for His name's sake, for love's name's sake. As though love would say, I'm my own purpose. I do it out of myself, through myself, as myself, for myself. The whole thing is stamped, that everything is stamped in our experience with the pattern of divine science, so that nothing can happen to us or with us that isn't of that pattern, that it is out of love and through love and as love and for love. So that love says, I do it for my own divine science. And I do it because you are my idea. We are the idea of that principle which love is. Life. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For love is with me. Love's rod and love's staff, they comfort me. So love says, I am with you. Love is with us. Love's been with us the whole way, the whole time, every moment. It's that sense of the ever-presence of love, that there never was a reality in that sense of the mortal, in that death valley of the mortal concept, or the shadow, even the shadow of that mortal concept, never had any reality, because love was present every instant. Love is life. Love, therefore, is every instance, every experience. Everything that looked like another experience was love working out the perfectibility of us. Perfectibility that brings us into this consciousness that we see that love is life. And so our life is love. As though life would say, love as life would say, my influence is ever present in human consciousness. You know that gorgeous statement in preface where Mrs. Eddy is talking about the healing of Christian Science, the physical healing of Christian Science, saying that it is present now as in Jesus' time, explaining there, as she does, that it is the operation of a divine principle. And she says, now as then, these mighty works are not supernatural, but supremely natural. They are the sign of Emmanuel, or God with us. God with us, love with us. And what is that God with us? She says, a divine influence ever present in human consciousness. That there's never a moment when God isn't present with us in human consciousness. Think of it. Never a moment are we left alone, because love is life, ever present. And she says, ever present in human consciousness and repeating itself. Repeating and repeating, and so we hear that feedback circuit of how love as life works to take us out of the whole mortal concept, the time concept, the limited concept of what we are as love's idea. That love would say here that everything even that looks like time is love, bringing us out of time. That the infinite cycles, you see, of those paths of love, the infinite feedback principle of those paths of the righteousness of love, are the cycles of divine science. And they have brought mankind, they are bringing mankind right out of the whole concept of time. First they brought forth time with that big bang, bringing forth the beginning of the going out of time, the cycling out of time to the isness of being. Because everything is out of myself, through myself, as myself, for myself. And this is the pattern that stamps every stage of the development of time, history, evolution, all, the whole universe. And so there is no evil. There just isn't any evil, that's all. Every experience belongs to the cycling out, the going out of the mortal concept, and this is good. There is no evil. Even the so-called death experience would be reinterpreted that the only thing that ever dies out is the mortal concept of life, while the immortal concept gathers and gathers definition and fullness and conscious certainty. Because love says, I'm all that there is. And I'm repeating and repeating myself as what I am. This is guarding and guiding everything. This is the rod and the staff that comfort us. And so we come to truth. Love prepareth a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Love anointeth my head with oil, my cup runneth over. So there is more. There is more than mind, spirit, soul, principle, life. Love is more than life. Love is truth. There are more than 5,000-year periods. There is a 6th and a 7,000-year period in each individual consciousness. And all this that we have seen about love so far, love being mind, love being spirit, love being soul, principle, and life, just as all that we have seen about those first 5,000-year periods has been a preparation for the fact that love is truth and love is love. So love was preparing something, preparing us for something, right? Preparing something for us much higher and deeper than what we have had. Love is preparing a table before us. Love prepares a table before us. We're at the point of truth. It is a truth table. A table of truth. Isn't that what love has been doing? Preparing a table? You know what a table is? A chart, a model, a matrix, a calculus matrix. We get a new table descending from heaven. It's the 4 by 3 that first appears as the higher 4x4. And you know that it says of that city, it doesn't just speak about the height and the width, but the depth. Isn't that so? That there are 3 aspects to that city. So that in a sense it is a 4x4x4. And so we get the further deep structure of the whole picture of reality, the further demonstration of the principle. We've said that we get, in another sense, a new 4x3. That the 4x4x4 is a 4x3. Am I now confusing you? We have 4 on the level of divine science. We have 4 on the level of absolute Christian science. And we have 4 on the level of Christian science. And we also have a 4x3 being the 3 levels. That new demonstration, a higher demonstration, that new crown of rejoicing, the table of divine science, which embraces everything within itself, embraces all that has gone before, everything that we have talked about, and lifts it up. Love has been preparing a table before us. You know, in the Old Testament, you had the table of showbread. And that table of showbread was part of the pattern that was shown to Moses on the mount. And that table had the 12 loaves. 12 loaves, one for each of the 12 tribes, arranged. There's 12 loaves of the bread of truth. Really the first instance of the trying to present that table of truth in its primitive form. And you come to the New Testament, you have the table of the Lord, where Jesus broke bread with his disciples. Again, the breaking up of truth to try to show what truth is, what the elements of truth are. And now we come into the age of the textbook, and Mrs. Eddy speaks of the table as the numeration table of Christian Science. That numeration table of Christian Science with the calculus. And finally we come into the 7,000-year period, and we see that the model of being overforms all of those previous tables, gathers them into the whole picture, and shows us that calculus of Christian Science as being embedded in the calculus of divine science. That everything is overformed with divine science. She says the purpose and motive to live aright can be gained now. This point 1, there it is again, you see. The purpose and motive to live aright can be gained now. This point 1, you have started, as you should. You have begun at the numeration table of Christian Science, and nothing but wrong intention can hinder your advancement. Working and praying with true motives, your Father will open the way. That's the ascending way in that table, isn't it? Who did hinder you that ye should not obey the truth? Once more I write, she says in Christian Science versus Pantheism, set your affections on things above, love one another, commune at the table of our Lord. in one spirit. Worship in spirit and truth, and if daily adoring, imploring, and living the divine life, truth, love, thou shalt partake of the bread that cometh down from heaven. Drink of the cup of salvation and be baptized in spirit. May our Father, Mother God, who in times past hath spread for us a table in the wilderness. See those different tables in the wilderness? And in the midst of our enemies, establish us in the most holy faith, plant our feet firmly on truth, the rock of Christ, the substance of things hoped for, and fill us with the life and understanding of God and goodwill towards men. So if you see what she says about table, it's beautiful. Every single instance of it is beautiful. Even if you look in the, if you take the references in fruitage, where people talk about having the textbook on the table next to them and how that saved them in a certain situation. And she speaks about the textbook being on a table and the house burned, and that was the only thing that remained. It's just many different levels at which she will use that term. But we see that love's table is set. Love's table is a matrix, isn't it? Love prepareth the table before us. It is the matrix of love. It is that matrix calculus of love. And that's in the presence of our enemies. It's right in the presence of that sense that there's anything else going on but love. That's the only enemy we have, is anything within our consciousness that thinks that there's anything else going on but love. Anything less than the full table being present. That numeration table which embraces within itself its own calculus, its own infinite field of possibilities. And so love has anointed us. When we touch the real meaning of that table, we feel that we are love's anointed. We are love's own consciousness. That love is the only thing that has ever filled our cup and filled it more than to the brim, filled it to the overfilling, so that there is no cup of bitterness, no bitter belly, no redundant drop in that cup that our Father, Mother love gives us. And what can love say more? We have that final tone of love in the 23rd Psalm. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me. You hear it's from the subjective. It is us speaking. It is our consciousness of love speaking, saying that surely goodness and mercy, that we know that goodness and mercy shall follow all the days of my life. And I will dwell in the house, the consciousness of love forever. So what does love say more? How does love see what is and what is to come? How does it take that final look into the 7,000-year period? Look at the essence of the 7,000-year period. What is to come is to accept that table, to accept that calculus, to dwell in that table of consciousness, to dwell in that calculus in all its levels. Dwell in love's table of truth, the matrix of love's calculus. So that from that consciousness, all goodness flows, only goodness flows. You can only see good, you can only perceive love's infinite mercy. In other words, that your whole experience, every detail, is the mercy of love. My great mercies, as the Bible says. And so it's really the implication that we must sit down at love's table. We must sit at love's table. And as Mrs. Eddy says, that she says, I begin at the numeration table of Christian Science at the feet of Christ, something like that. That she sits down at that table. We have to partake of it, to eat of it, become one with the primal elements of truth and love, become one with divine science, and then indeed we have no more need. So isn't that a beautiful thing, that 23rd Psalm? As though to show us where consciousness will dwell in the next 1,000-year period, where it's all leading, where the form of the 6,000-year period, this textbook, is leading to, not to the model of being, but to the consciousness of the model of being. Not to capitalized terms, but to the consciousness of the capitalized terms and the categories. And that involves within itself a whole way, a twofold way of ascending and descending, and ascending again and descending and ascending and descending. Because in that final descent of the 23rd Psalm is again an ascending way. It implies within itself an ascent. So the dynamic is ever there to ascend and descend. No man cometh, I never can get that statement right. No man ascendeth up to heaven except he which has come down from heaven, even the Son of God who is in heaven. So they are the two aspects of heaven, of being in heaven. And all that there is heaven and being in heaven. Okay.